Newsradio 700 WLW.
So there was a study that came out, I want to say late this week, Lafayette College in Pennsylvania. And it's all about how if you are constantly criticizing your partner and pointing out their faults, it could send your partner to an early grave. Those who indicated they were criticized, quote unquote, often had a 44% higher risk of being deceased 5 years later compared with those who indicated they were criticized, quote unquote, some of the time. Someone who might know better than me is Dr. Harville Hendrix. If you watch Oprah, you know who Dr. Harville Hendrix is, co-founder of Safe Conversations, and he and his wife, Dr. Helen Kelly Hunt, travel the world teaching couples how to truly communicate. And Dr. Hendrix, how are you on this glorious day?
Ken, I'm really wonderful. How are you?
Oh, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I've seen you on Oprah. Gosh, you've been on there a lot, and you were Dr. Phil before before there was Dr. Phil, right?
Yes. All right. I was on before Dr. Phil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you make? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Gotcha. But he stayed on afterwards and got his own show, and I went a different direction.
Well, good for you. I'm glad the direction took you to us here today. What do you make of this study? It just seems as though anything that wears on the psyche wears on the health. It creates inflammation inside the body. It creates stress, and stress kills. Is that a normal progression there? Is that a normal chain there?
Yes, it is. And what is exciting to those of us in the mental health field is the research on we've known this for a long time because we've seen the deleterious impact of negative exchanges between partners. I've worked with couples for now around 50 years, so 40 or 50 years. And negativity, what finally got clear to Helen and me as we worked with couples is that the primary problems couples had was not the problems they brought to talk about, but the negativity with which they talked about the problem. And that they couldn't actually deal with the problem until they dealt with the negativity. And then, so we knew that, and we began working to decrease the negativity so that you could actually focus on the problem. And then we noticed that when people did that, something systemic began to change, that they began to look better, their energy began to increase. And then we began to, the research began coming out, and a lot of it didn't start until around 2000, about the impact of negative exchanges on the neurochemistry of the body, meaning that when you are negative, you create cortisol and adrenaline, and those are immune system depressors. Yeah. You depress the immune system, you then decrease your ability to respond to disease, and blah, 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 blah. So then they began to discover that some cells in the brain called telomeres would change as a result of that, and then they began to attach longevity to the intensity of negativity. And so finally we arrived at the point where we have a process with working with couples that we call zero negativity, and that has to become the goal of the couple if they ever want to get to why they came to therapy anyway.
Right, and I like that zero negativity. I've often wondered when couples fight, if it isn't more of a self-esteem issue, if it's not more about the person than it is about the person they're arguing with. I sometimes think that what we view as our own frailties come out more, it's more about us. You know, the old line, it's not you, it's me. Well, it probably is me. And when you get into some of these discussions, how much of that is, in your opinion, just a self-esteem problem?
Well, very much self-esteem problems, and those problems are rooted in unresolved childhood issues around self-esteem, where people grew up in families where they were not affirmed, where they were, in fact, related to negatively, were, with perfectionistic standards or with criticisms, a whole range of things that can reduce a person's feeling of okayness, which is just a very simple but wonderful feeling. And so you grow up having that not resolved in childhood, you bring it into adulthood, and it then becomes an active agent in your adult intimate relationships. And so that, yes, you're struggling with your self-esteem when you get into these fights, and to your reactive things to when somebody says something that you disagree with or it feels like a put down.
Yeah.
If you have high self-esteem, you can say, well, hey, I can imagine that you can see it that way, and let me tell you how I'm experiencing it. But if you have low self-esteem, you'll say, what in the hell are you talking to me like that for? Blah, 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 blah.
And not to, and that's good, and that's poignant, but not to laugh. I probably shouldn't have laughed at it, but that's one of the reasons why marriages fail as often as they do. I think that there are a number of mitigating factors. One could be infidelity, one could be finances, but at the root of it all is communication. And if you can't talk, a lot of those other things fester up, don't they?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And then to put back to negativity is the major impediment to the kind of communication that leads to resolving the problems that couples need to resolve in order to be with that. And Helen and I call it the put down.
Yeah.
And a put down is anything that says you're not okay. Like the eye roll, or the tone of voice, or what?
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from? There are subtleties that say what you're doing is not okay, meaning I negate you. You have to be somebody else in order to be okay with me, which means that's a double negativity, that what I did was wrong, and now I'm wrong, and now we really have a problem because we're in a life and death struggle.
So you and Dr. Hunt, how long have you been married?
We've been married 38 years.
And you've never had a fight?
Wow.
Well, I would think you practice what you preach. I'm just thinking, your house has to be nirvana. I'm just guessing here, Doctor.
well, let's say that it's way better now than it was. It was interesting how hard it is to practice what you preach, because for about 20 years we did have a challenging relationship, and we make no bones about it. We tell it in public. But about the first 20 years, we really struggled. But what really got us over our struggle was the discovery that it wasn't our problems that was our problem. Mm-hmm. It was our negativity toward each other about the problem that was the problem. And so we finally got that clear and moved into a zero negativity agreement between us, which worked so well that I then took the zero negativity agreement into clinical practice with couples, and have made that a standard part of the theory and a standard part of the practice. But in the past 20 years, having moved negativity, or honoring the zero negativity pledge, but you have to do something else. Yeah. You can't just take out the garbage. You actually have to clean up the smell.
Yeah.
So what you do after you drop negativity is you have to then deliberately increase the amount of positive input, which we call an affirmations process. That is to say, hey, great to live with you. How are you doing today? Anything that affirms the other person and says, I'm not going to hurt you, you're safe with me, then they begin to relax, and then you can have this wonderful back and forth flow of oscillation of energy and excitement. But if you don't have that expectation, if the brain can't expect that when I walk into the room, I'm going to get a smile rather than why are you late, then I'm not going to be spontaneous and we're not going to have fun. So there has to be a really deliberate commitment to a process of zero negativity plus affirmations, and that has to become predictable.
Yeah.
Once you can predict it, then everything changes.
Dr. Harville Hendrix is our guest. He and his wife, Dr. Helen LeKelly Hunt, teach relationship skills. They've helped thousands of couples with zero negativity. Doctor, I often say that marriage is a job. You just can't show up and just think, it's going to work out. You mentioned you not only have to take out the garbage, you have to get rid of the smell. Well, if marriage was easy, there would be no divorce. It's not easy because it involves two people who sometimes come from completely different backgrounds. They've arrived at the same point. They've found each other attractive. And you have to work at what made you attracted to that person all those years ago. And it's something you do on a daily basis to make sure, as you just said, make sure they're comfortable with you. And if they are, then a lot of this other stuff falls into place, doesn't it?
Right, and that's the biggest point. I do not say, Helen, you're not safe for me. I have to say, am I safe for you? And so that my goal is that when I walk into the room, she knows that I'm going to bring in something other than a judgment about her, but I'm going to bring in an appreciation. Now, that means we can then talk about our differences, but that's okay if we are not being negative about each other about those differences. And that's a subtle kind of nuance that's so really important.
He has a book. He has a lot of books out. Best-selling author many, many times over. The book that I liked and I've read, and I'm going to tell you in front of all of the audience here today, is Getting the Love You Want. I think that was a wonderful book that you authored. And
thank you.
You can find that on Amazon.com, as I'm sure you can find all of his other works. And Dr. Hendrix, this was enlightening. This really was. And I think if we just commit to zero negativity for the rest of today, then it will be easier to commit to it tomorrow. It's one day at a time. And let's maybe we can all try that from now until the sun goes down tonight. How about that?
That's exactly the practice we do with couples when they come to our workshops.
Good.
Today, zero negativity. Then
Good.
Tomorrow we'll discuss what was that like, and then can you do another day? But what we have learned is you have to do it for 90 days in order for your brain to adjust to using negativity as a protective device, and replaces it with affirmations, knowing that it's safer to be affirming than to be negative. Because really the whole thing is about safety.
Dr. Hendrix, thank you. This is great stuff. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. You have a great day.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate you. Have a good holiday.
Dr. Harville Hendrix, co-founder of Safe Conversations.